On today's Locked On Jayhawks, Kansas versus Texas, we preview the game for the Jayhawks.
You are Locked On Jayhawks, your daily podcast on the Kansas Jayhawks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
I'm Derek Johnson. Give me a follow on Twitter at DJohnsonRadio. You can hear me right here with Locked On Jayhawks. Thanks for making LOJ your first listen every day. We are free and available anywhere you get your podcast, including on our YouTube page where you can like and subscribe to the show. On today's edition of Locked On Jayhawks, we're previewing Kansas versus Texas. Jayhawks next game coming up on Saturday. We'll get to top storylines of the game, Texas scouting report, matchups of the game, player matchups, and Hawks to soar KU players we think are set up to have a big game in this one. First, this episode of the show is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. Make every moment more with FanDuel, where you can bet $100 and $50 in bonus bets if your first bet of $5 or more wins. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started today. So top storylines in this one. I mean, this is the last matchup between these two. I mean, for now, we don't know. They could meet in the Big 12 tournament, and who knows if eventually they decide to schedule each other in non-con play. You know, in football, I don't really see that happening because Texas is going to be like, well, what do we have to gain from, scheduling Kansas? And not that Kansas is going to be looking to add like a, top 25 game on the schedule necessarily in the non-con like that. But with basketball, maybe it does make a little bit more sense. So it could possibly happen. And like I said, the Big 12 tournament is there. But for now, this is the only one on the schedule that we know about. And yes, this isn't, Kansas, Missouri for the last time. It's not near that, right? But Texas is still one of the name brands of the league. And I think back mostly to the fights that you had when Rick Barnes was at Texas, when Texas was really running in the 2000s, whether it was with DJ Augustine or Kevin Durant or AJ Abrams or I don't know, even like some of the teams with Shaka Smart because of the Shaka Smart Bill Self stuff, right? Like there's some interesting stuff there. So I think it becomes a little bit interesting there in what you've done. And last season, Texas won 2 of the 3 in the matchup. KU won the game in Allen Fieldhouse in what was an electric game. You had that like Grady Dick 3 that made the crowd go bananas to put KU up big, and then they ended up winning the game. And then Texas slaughtered Kansas when that game was in Austin, and then Texas did the same thing in the Big 12 championship game. So you do end up with, I guess, a little bit of revenge there, but there's not a lot of familiar faces for Texas. I guess, Tyrese Hunter and Dylan Disu are still back, but, like Timmy Allen's gone, and some of their best players like Marcus Carr's gone, Serge Rice is gone, and stuff like that. And KU obviously has some different faces too. No Jalen Wilson, Grady Dick, and everything. But it still is kind of a storyline here for sure. Now, from a conference race perspective, this is not the conference race for Texas. For Texas, this is a game about trying to secure your punching the ticket for the NCAA tournament. Right now, they're kind of a bubble team. For Kansas, yes, there is seeding implications. You're still like a kind of a 2 seed right now. Can you play yourself up into a 1 seed? Will you fall off into a 3 seed, right? There are questions there between the two, but just trying to stick around in the Big 12 title race. We talked earlier this week that for me, I think Kansas needs to win out realistically if they want to win a share of the Big 12 at this point. Maybe you can get away with going 4-1. But that involves you winning out at home because you still play at Baylor and at Houston, right? And you would have to win that Houston game. That can't be one of your losses. Point being, if you want to win the Big 12, this is one of those that you really do have to win. So for the Texas Scouting Report, they're 17-9 on the season, 6-7 in Big 12 play, just below 500. Played a crappy non-con. They went 11-2 in the non-con, but that doesn't sound as good as it actually was because they only had one top 100 win, and that was over LSU, who's not even a top 70 team. They had losses to UConn by 10. I guess not a big deal there. Marquette by 21. Dylan Disu was hurt. I don't know if it was for the entire non-con or at least a big chunk of the non-con. And you could make the argument their best player. So that certainly hurt them there, and that is part of the story. But it wasn't a ultra-impressive non-con for them. And then the start of conference play didn't get off much better. They started 1-3. They ended up bouncing back after that at a nice home win over Baylor, beat Oklahoma and TCU, They had a loss to BYU and then in overtime against Houston, in which, I mean, if they won that game, not only would that have been beneficial for KU in the Big 12 title race right now, but also, I don't know, maybe we would be talking about Texas having a more secure resume for getting in the NCAA tournament right now, right? I mean, that one extra win, if they'd be 18-8, 7-6 in Big 12 play with the beating Houston, who knows? But they did lose those, got them back to 4-5. Then they lost to Iowa State. They crushed West Virginia in a win, lost by 21 at Houston. And then earlier this week, they beat Kansas State by 6 points in what was kind of an ugly home win where Disu had 20 points. He was great, but no one else scored double digits for Texas. So point being, this becomes, a game that if they win, I mean, they're highly motivated to try to, punch your ticket to the NCAA tournament. And they have some work to do. What they do well, overall, the offense is ranked top 30 in the country, according to Ken Palm's adjusted offensive efficiency. So good offensive team. They are top 40 in the country in three-point percentage, and they're top 3 in Big 12 only games in three-point percentage. Good shooting team. That's been a problem for KU this year, right? They're second in the Big 12 in conference games and free throw percentage. So that just adds to being a good shooting team. And they're above average at 2-point offense. So they're good at it, not elite at it, but they're good at it. And when you combine it with the 3-point and the free throw offense, that's how this becomes an efficient offense. On the defensive side of the ball, it's a top 50 defense, or top 52-point defense. Sorry. The number is up 4 percentage points in what they're allowing on 2-point shots in conference-only games. So that has gotten a little bit worse. But they also do have a top 5 block rate in Big 12-only games. They've been a decent enough 2-point defense. What they haven't done well, the defense overall is ranked, just outside the top 45 in the country, which that's not like bad if you're a top 50 defense necessarily. Kansas offense is, ranked in the 40s too. So I guess if you view it that way, it's kind of an even matchup. KU is as of right now 46th in Ken Palm's adjusted offensive efficiency. Texas is 46th in Ken Palm's adjusted defense efficiency. So it is kind of a neutral match in that regard, but it's not something you would say is a strength, and they're just 8th in Big 12 only play and defensive efficiency. So again, not bad, but it certainly wouldn't be a strength either. They have been a poor defensive rebounding team. They rank outside the top 200 nationally in defensive rebounding rate. Mostly though, they've just been murdered from 3. And I don't watch Texas enough. We've had so many of these conversations about the balance of a little bit of luck and a little bit of bad 3-point defense. And I've kind of concluded that I think it's both in some of these games for Kansas, right? Like Trey King hitting 4 threes, that's bad luck. Going under a ball screen or leaving a guy wide open or having a miscommunication, which we've seen many, many times, that's just bad defense, right? So it is a little bit of both. But for Texas, I don't watch them enough to tell you if it's all bad luck or if it's the same thing, to say that I've watched each and every possession to be like, oh yeah, they're just giving up way too many open threes. Teams have shot 36.6% from 3 against them, which is the worst mark allowed in Big 12 only play. And it's on high volume too. And that's the thing that tells me that maybe this is a poor 3-point defense. The fact that it's high volume tells you that teams are taking a lot of attempts. Okay, well, on one hand, you could say, well, they're taking a lot of attempts because they're making a lot. So obviously you're going to keep chucking up more. Typically though, if one of the best ways to defend the 3-point shot is just to avoid it from ever coming out of the guy's hand. If you play good defense, if you're there on the catch, if you deny the ball, if you're pressuring the ball, if you're going over screens, it's going to be harder for the player to even shoot the 3. And so theoretically, if you're a good 3-point defense, you're going to just give up less 3-point attempts in a game. And that hasn't happened for Texas. So maybe something to keep an eye on in this game. Even though the offense is solid for Texas, they don't get to the free throw line much. They get their shot block a fair amount. They also don't shoot a ton of threes, despite the fact that, they shoot them very efficiently, especially with Max Abmas. Personnel, it is a combo of Abmas, who's the transfer from Oral Roberts, 17 points, over 4 assists, 37% on high volume from 3. Tyrese Hunter, 11 points, 4 assists, or 11 points, 4.3 assists from the floor. He's shooting 46%, 34 from 3. And then Shendell Weaver has kind of modest stats, not a great 3-point shooter. He's in the 20s for percentage, but he has been a solid defender for them. Those 3 players combined to really log all the minutes at the 1 and the 2 so far. Weaver might even play some at the 3 when they want to play 3-guard lineups. And then also at the 3, you'll see Ithiel Horton, who was UCF transfer. KU actually targeted him in the portal, but never got the visit. He's averaging 6.2 points per game, 37% from three. Wouldn't that be nice to have on KU? I know those are not like jump off the page numbers. That'd be huge for this bench if they would have got him. And then Brock Cunningham also plays kind of the 3 and 4 spacer glue guy for them. 6'8" stud athlete, Dillon Mitchell. He plays the 4. He is basically a guard wing type who will dunk on anyone, get a bunch of rebounds, good athlete, not really a shooter. 10.5 points, 8.5 rebounds per game, over a block, over a steal per game, 58% shooting. Hasn't made a 3 this year. They have to get creative with their spacing to how it affects their offense, having a 4-man who can't really shoot in today's day of college basketball. Kind of similar to Kansas with KJ Adams. And then at the center position, 6'9", 225-pound Dylan Disu. He's the primary 5, 17 points, 5 boards since coming back, over an assist per game, over steal per game, over block per game on 50, 55, 81 shooting splits. That's 50% from the floor, 55 from 3, 81 at the foul line. He is legitimately, to me, the top 5 player in the league when healthy. And then he is backed up by 6'11", 231-pound Virginia transfer, Caden Shedrick. He's good defender, rim roller, goes for about 8 points, over a block per game. And he'll kind of fill in with Dylan Disu when he's out of the game. All right, we're going to continue on with the show with our matchups of the game. What could determine this one, player matchups, and Hawks and Soar on this episode of Locked on Jayhawks. Grocery bills are so expensive these days, but now they don't have to be. Start getting cash back on your grocery shopping with the free Ibotta app. That's right. And get cash back every time you shop. Do you love making money, but also love spending money? Don't we all? You can make money while you spend it every time you shop with Ibotta. And spring break is right around the corner, which means you're going shopping. But don't shop for your big trip and get nothing in return. Make sure you're getting cash back every time you shop with Ibotta. Join the over 50 million users and earn cash back every single time you shop from over 2,700 brands and retailers, including Lowe's, Macy's, Sephora, Best Buy, and more. Right now, Ibotta is offering their listeners $5 just for trying Ibotta by using code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE when you register. Just go to the App Store or Google Play Store and download the free Ibotta app to start earning cash back and use code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE. That is Ibotta in the Google Play or App Store and use code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE. On to our matchups of the game on this episode of Locked on Jayhawks. Thank you to the everydayers tuning in to each and every episode. We'll have a recap of the KU Texas game sometime later this weekend. Matchup number 1 is the old school mid-range 2 basketball game, baby. Feels like this is the equivalent of like triple option offense in college football. There's still some bit of art to it, you know, but the analytics game is, I don't know, maybe that's not fair because the triple option stuff, some of it's pretty efficient. This would be more like I formation power football, I guess, is the mid-range too. Like it's a little bit out of style. Not as many teams are doing it as much. But Texas is more than comfortable allowing mid-range 2s. So you might be able to get some open shots there. There's only about 5-6% of college basketball as a whole gets off more shots in the mid-range than teams do against Texas. So basically, they're in the 94th percentile in the amount of shots they are giving up from the mid-range per the other shots they're giving up, right? Interesting for KU, who doesn't take a ton of mid-range shots. We had whose stat line is anyway with Nick Short earlier this week. Check out that episode if you missed it. And one of the things, Hunter Dickinson is leading Kansas in mid-range attempts per game, and he's shooting them at actually a very high percentage. KJ Adams takes the mid-range. Kevin takes a decent amount of mid-range, hasn't shot them super well. I guess that is kind of a storyline here. There was the Bill Self press conference on Thursday saying they made it sound like he was kind of questionable for Saturday, but I don't know, based on him playing last game and now having the week off in between, I'm just kind of assuming that's going to be the case, but who totally knows. On the flip side, Texas takes over a fifth of their shots. So over 20% of the shots that Texas takes from the floor are mid-range 2s. That ranks also in the 94th percentile in the country. They've only shot 36% on mid-range 2s, though, which, I mean, you would honestly be happy with if you're Kansas, because think about it this way. So the most efficient shots are at the rim and from 3. And the reason why is because basically the equivalent of the point per possession from the 3 ball, you just multiply times 1.5, right? So theoretically, if you shoot 30% from 3, that's the equivalent of shooting 45% from 2. it gets the same, message across. Shooting 60% on twos is the same equivalent as shooting 40% on threes. Well, the fact that they're shooting 36% on mid-range twos, that's the equivalent to only shooting 24% from three. So even though they take a lot of them, you're almost like content to give it up if you're Kansas. Now, the one thing you can't allow is a team who does take a lot of them. You don't want to end up in a game where, and keep in mind, Kansas plays a drop coverage, which basically the center is going to drop into the paint and everything. That does leave some creases and openings if a player goes over the screen for the offensive player at the other end to dribble downhill on the screen and pull up for an open mid-range jump shot from the elbow or free throw line or baseline or whatever it is. So you are going to give up more mid-range shots if you're Kansas against teams who are willing to take them. And that can be a plus or minus, because if they continue to shoot at the percentage they have all year long, it actually could be a win for Kansas if they take a lot of shots that are inefficient. But if they're taking shots that they're comfortable with and you're giving up a lot of them and they go 9 of 18 on mid-range, then all of a sudden you lose some of that efficiency. And I think that could be interesting in how this game goes. Number 2 is the Kansas interior paint defense. Texas has flash from the guards positions with Max Asmith and Tyrese Hunter on the outside. But those guys who can go inside, combined with Dylan Disu, Caden Shedrick on rolls and dunks, Dillon Mitchell's and then the guards driving with their quickness, makes a lot of these players a threat to score on the inside. Overall, they shoot 66% at the rim, does Texas. They're 44% in the paint. Both of those rank in the top quarter of college basketball per CBB analytics. So they've been a good team inside the paint. And Texas is 14-1 this season when they shoot above 50% on 2-point shots for the year. Now, this goes back to the mid-range shooting stuff. It's a combo of the two. So if they can get that going from 2, 14-1. That's why this becomes prevalent for Kansas really at both levels. But they're only 3-8 when they shoot 50% or worse from 2-point range. So above 50%, 14-1, 50% or worse, 3-8. And if Kansas can limit some of those inside shots, limit guard penetration, limit Dylan Disu from going off, you feel good about where you're going to be at in the result at the end of the night. Number 3 is Kansas avoiding the turnover bug. Texas is in the 68th percentile in the country in steal rate, so that's something they're proficient at, above average to good. I wouldn't quite call that elite or anything like that, but boy, do they capitalize on those turnovers, and that's what I'm most interested in as part of this. They're averaging 16.3 points off turnovers per game. That ranks in the 91st percentile according to CBB analytics. If you just don't turn it over, they're not going to get easy points off turnovers. And then you're going to take away one of their strengths, right? So have a game where you only have 8 or 9 turnovers, and that'll be another thing that you'll feel great about. I would have had work the offensive glass in here as a matchup, because Texas' 4 worst defensive rebounding games, keep in mind, again, they're outside the top 200 in defensive rebounding rate, are all losses. But KU is not a good offensive rebounding team, despite having personnel where they're playing 2 bigs next to each other. They've not been a good offensive rebounding team. That was something I thought they could be good at this year, because Hunter Dickinson, KJ had a good offensive rebounding rate last year, even though it was bad defensive rebounding rate, but we haven't seen that carry over to this year or get better. It's actually, gotten worse here. You have 2 wings in Kevin McCullar and Furphy. You would think you would be a good offensive rebounding team. Nope. Kansas ranked 293rd in the country and 13th in Big 12 only games in offensive rebounding rate. So didn't want to put that one on there, but I guess one to possibly keep an eye on. The player matchup here is Hunter Dickinson versus Dylan Disu. I think you could make the argument that Disu is a top 5 player in the Big 12. You can make the same argument for Hunter Dickinson. And it's interesting because both players do get a lot done in the high post and in the mid-range. They can both take that shot. Disu is a little bit quicker, a little bit more athletic. Dickinson has a size advantage. Disu is only 6'9", so you've got 4 or 5 inches on him. I think that's going to be a really fun match between 2 really skilled offensive players in the Big 12. Low key, the Dillon Mitchell versus KJ Adams matchup is going to be a lot of fun too, because they're very similar in a lot of ways. You have 2 basically really athletic wings who are chiseled, who are strong, who are not shooters. Now, Mitchell's the much better rebounder. Adams is the better passer, and there are certain things that are different about their game. but they're very similar in what they are in terms of the archetypes of being, a non-shooting wing foreman in today's day and age of college basketball that are going to give you a lot of other good things when they're on the floor. All right, let's move on to our Hawks to Soar KU players we think can stick out on this episode of Locked On Jayhawks. First, we're brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. Get buckets with your first bet on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Because right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 if your bet wins. Bet on all your favorites in the NBA, whether it's a team, whether it's a player, whether it's players. You can build your own 20-plus point same-game parlay. You can build just 20-point parlays of who you think is going to score 20 that night across the NBA. There's quick bets, live same-game parlays, exclusive props, and more. You can get in on the KU Texas action. Line's not out as of right now. Usually it's pretty close to what KenPom has it as, which has it at 6 right now. So if you think Kansas can win by more than 6 playing at home and Allen Fieldhouse after a week off, then get in on that or make your own same-game parlay. I mentioned I'm going to be doing a Johnny Furphy, Andrew Wiggins parlay for both the score 12-plus points. We'll see how that goes over the weekend. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and shoot your shot. FanDuel, official sportsbook partner of the NBA. Hawks to Soar. This is our segment where we talk about what KU players could be set up for a big game here. I'm going to go with Dajuan Harris. Max Abmas is a really, really talented elite offensive player. He can shoot the ball. He can shoot it from 35 feet. He's a good passer, good in the pick and roll. Just does a little bit of everything on offense. And maybe Dajuan Harris will be so spent from the defensive side of the ball that this won't really apply. But Max Abmas is not a good defender. And so Dajuan Harris should be able to beat him off the bounce. He should be able to get into the lane. He should be able to score and drive and kick and get assists. I think this will be a good game for Dajuan Harris, especially for a guy who, Bill Self has said in the past this season, he's a better 30 to 32 minute per game guy. And it makes sense because he does have to, when he is at his best, exert a lot of energy on the defensive end to be a pest on that end and make an impact there. But if he's playing 36, 37 minutes, I know that doesn't sound like a huge difference, but it kind of is. And you start to get spent out there. Well, the one hand of chasing Abmas around on one side of the ball maybe makes it tougher. But the other side of it is you just had a week off, and this should be a more fresh Dajuan for this game to take advantage of that. Hunter Dickinson, it is interesting. Like Texas gives up a lot of shots at the rim. So the national average, the amount of shots that teams shoot at the rim compared to all the other shots they take is about 30% of their shots. So about 3 in every 10 shots that a team fires up are at the rim, national average. Texas defense is at 37%. So it's well above the national average. Teams get a lot of shots at the rim against them. That should mean a lot of shots for Hunter Dickinson. The downside, though, the efficiency has been bad. Even though teams are shooting a lot there, they're not shooting well. Teams are only shooting 55% at the rim so far this season, which is not a good number. But, Dickinson, outside of that kind of weird stretch with the Tech game and the second half of the Baylor game, has been a great finisher. He's got that soft touch. He's got a 4 or 5 inch advantage on Dillon Disu. He'll have his hands full on the other end, but on the offensive end, I think he should be able to have a good game. Then you look at Texas being a bad defensive rebounding team. I think he'll be able to rack up some good numbers. I'll say a 20-10 game for Hunter Dickinson here in this one. I'll also add whoever Texas 3-man guards. Brock Cunningham has been a solid defender. He's more of a good team defender, though. I still like KU's matchup if it's, Furphy or Kevin McCullar. McCullar I would like a little bit better because the team defender thing would be better against Johnny Furphy, who's more of like a spot-up shooter guy. But they could also put Ithiel Horton in at 3, or they could put a small guard in at the 3. I think that could mean post-ups for Kevin McCullar on this. I think this could be some Furphy time. But I think Dajuan Harris, Hunter Dickinson, those would be the main two that I would look at. All right, let's get to our KU Texas recap on next episode of the show. That'll be this weekend. That'll do it for us tonight with Locked On Jayhawks. See you next time with LOJ. Have a great rest of your weekend.